Let us look at the livelihood of a family resided in a village in Netherlands 100 years back. 5 brothers of Steve's family were engaged in their 20 acres of land. With the development of modern method of farming, they bought a tractor and started using a good fertilizer. Hence, they started producing more within less time, and only 2 people could finish the work in the farm. As a result, 2 of them started working in the nearby textile industry, and one of them started selling their extra produce in a shop. What changes do you notice in Steve's family? Changing method of farming prospered the agricultural sector. It produced much more than earlier. It has given rise to agro-based industries. Then, with the need of manufacturing goods, various factories came up and started expanding. Then, this secondary sector became important in production and employment. Development of primary and secondary sector helped in growth of other tertiary sectors like shopping centers, banking, transportation, and many other service-based activities. Now, this service sector has become the most important sector in terms of total production. This is the pattern of growth of the 3 sectors in developed nations. It is important to know whether the developing nations show the same trend or not. Have a look at the graph. The total GDP of India in 1973 was Rs 30,000 crores, where the primary sector contributed the highest amount. What changes do you see after 30 years? In 2003, the total GDP of the country increased manifold. The largest producing sector in 2003 is the tertiary sector. Though the production has increased in all the sectors over the last 30 years, the tertiary sector has shown a tremendous growth among them. Let us have a look at the percentage share of each sector in gross domestic product. What changes do you notice in the percentage share of each sector in GDP over the last 30 years? The share of primary sector, which was about 45% in 1973, has reduced remarkably to about 24% in 2003. The share of secondary sector has shown a small increase from about 20% in 1973 to about 22% in 2003. There is tremendous growth in tertiary sector, which contributed about 35% in 1973, has increased to about 54% in 2003. What do you think are the reasons for rising importance of the tertiary sector in our country? Some of the reasons for such growth are need for basic services in a developing nation, requirement with respect to development of primary and secondary sector, demand for services due to rising income level, huge growth of information and communication technology. What basic facilities do you want in your country? Some of such facilities we need in our country are hospitals, educational institutions, banks, post and telegraph, good transport, communication facilities, police stations, courts, municipal corporations, village panchayats, etc. Do you know who bears the prime responsibility for the growth of these services? In a developing country like India, government has to take the responsibility for most of these services. Requirement for these basic services has given birth to all these service-based activities. Let us find out the answers for some questions. How do we carry the raw materials and the industrial or agricultural produce from one place to another without better transportation? Why do we store the huge amount of agricultural and industrial produce without good storage facility? Why do we sell them if the nation is poor in trade and commerce? Now, can you infer the basic facilities needed for development of agriculture and industry? The basic facilities such as transport, storage, trade and commerce needed for agriculture and industry have given rise to such tertiary activities. Let us look at our lives in the cities. Higher income group in a modern city is willing to spend more in some different activities like eating out, going for extra shopping in the malls, going out for entertainment, visiting tourist places, putting their kids in private schools, going for good private hospitals, etc. Thus, rise in income levels of the people gave rise to many related services needed for further development of the society. Nowadays, you hardly send letters by post. You email. You just click the mouse and get all the information around. Your brother need not stand in a queue for buying the travel ticket. It is done sitting at home just on a click. Your father need not go out to the telephone office to pay the bill. He does it online. Your mom need not go out for shopping quite often. She can shop online. What made our life so easy and comfortable? Information and communication technology has brought enormous changes in the service sector in India recently. Information and communication technology consists of all the technical means used to handle information and aid communication, including computer and network hardware as well as necessary software. It also consists of IT as well as telephony, broadcast media, and all types of audio and video processing and transmission systems. Growth of information and communication technology is one of the important reasons for fast growth of few cities in India like Hyderabad, Bangalore, etc. Our country began with a fast-paced economic growth as globalization principles were initiated in 1990 for international competition and foreign investment. It is predicted that India will be among the leading economies of the world in the near future. How do these two sets of pictures differ from each other? People in first set just manage to earn a living. They perform these services because there's no other alternative opportunities. Very large number of workers are engaged in such services. People in the second set are highly skilled and educated workers. They earn and generate huge amounts of money. There are limited number of services which employ these skilled labor. What do you infer from the example? Service sector in India employs people with various skills, and all the activities under this sector are not grown equally well. Let us have a look at the share of each sector in employment. What changes do you see in employment from 1973 to 2000? Primary sector contributed about 73% of total employment, which has reduced to 61% in 2000. Though there is growth in employment in secondary and tertiary sector, but still primary sector continues to be the largest employer. Now, let us compare the percentage share of each sector in both gross domestic product and employment. In 1973, the primary sector, which was the largest employer, was the largest contributor to GDP. What difference do you observe in 2000-2003? The primary sector remained the largest employer, but no more shared highest amount in gross domestic product. On the contrary, its share to the total GDP is declined from 45% in 1973 to 24% in 2003. Again, the service sector, which contributes highest percentage in GDP in 2003, provides employment to much lower percentage of population. What do you think are the reasons for such a scenario? There was not enough jobs created in the secondary and tertiary sector, which is provided by the fact we already observed in the bar graphs. Though industrial output went up by 8 times in the last few decades, employment in the industrial sector went up only by 2.5 times. Similarly, though production in the service sector rose 11 times, employment went up less than 3 times. More than half of the population in the country are working in the primary sector, mainly in agriculture, producing only a quarter of the GDP. On the other hand, secondary and tertiary sector produce 3/4 of the total GDP, whereas they employ only less than half of the population. Thus, we need to focus both on the employment and GDP in each sector, as both do not synchronize in the developing nations. Do you think that agriculture is overloaded due to higher amount of illiterate people who cannot provide the skills required for secondary and tertiary sector? Or is it because the people engaged in primary activity do not want to leave their age-old occupation?